You are listening to the Casting Shadows podcast. A little while ago, I got to have a conversation with a YouTuber about a video called Mastering Player Choice in Mystery and Horror RPGs. The YouTuber goes by the handle of TrilltheDM, and I find they produce very high-quality video essays. But I had some questions about this one, and due to a fortuitous turn of events on Twixter, of all places, we were able to connect, and due to his open-mindedness and I guess a little bit of luck favoring me, we ended up deciding to talk about the content of the video. And I really like where it went, and I hope that you will too. So, without any further ado, this is a 90-minute conversation. Let's get right to it. If you're curious about the video and would like to watch it for yourself, the link will be available in the show notes. I'd recommend that you watch it before you listen to the conversation, but the choice, as always, dear listener, is yours. Right now, I'm joined by Trill, or TrilltheDM, who's putting out some really interesting content on YouTube, video essays on a variety of different topics and generating a lot of interesting conversation. So I think I'd like to start, if you could explain to us briefly who you are and how we can find you on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do go by TrilltheDM, Trill for short, I guess, if it's kind of more casual. But yeah, the best way to find me on YouTube is TrilltheDM all together. And I think that should be at that point, there's no, or just youtube.com/TrilltheDM, right? Or at TrilltheDM, I think is the way they do it now. Yeah. So I've been playing fantasy tabletop games for quite a while, and trying to break into at least the more horror mystery kind of focus side of things, and kind of sharing those thoughts is kind of I think where this conversation comes from, right?
It does. Yeah. We bumped into each other on the site formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah.
And a few weeks before that, your video Mastering Player Choice in Mystery and Horror RPGs had been sent my way for a discussion group that we have on Facebook that we've mentioned before, the horribly named, but I enjoy the name of it, the RPG Techniques Consortium,
Nice.
where we gather together, regardless of our own individual biases or preferences as players, to talk about, or at least try to overcome those biases, to talk about what we did, why we did it, and what happened as a result of what we did, and who we played with, and what game we were playing, and what the situation was, and all that sort of stuff. Techniques as techniques. So it's an ideal video, I think you can imagine, in that context, to come up. It's a popular
generate
topic.
Generate some conversation at the very least. I think your position was that it was a bit of a flawed argument. I think it's
right. My reaction to it, and there were some people who were on my side, and there were some people who were in the middle, and we have a whole spectrum of opinions about it, right? So, my reaction to it was that there's a flaw, which we can get to, but this is not to say I think it's a bad video, or that's all I see when I look at the video. It presents a very cogent argument for a very particular approach that you want to take, and I think I want to start there with what you wanted to communicate with the video. Like, why did you make the video, I guess is where I want to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've had experiences as a player, playing like the more, you know, Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green, these types of games. And it seemed like every time as a player, uh, there's a certain type of way to play these games, or at least that's been my experience so far. And it's very much built on a lot of these kind of like I almost want to say kind of like a more of like a Western mystery narrative approach. Kind of like how how would I put it? Specifically in regards to kind of like the way things play out.
Hmm.
This could be as a result of, you know, just bad handlers, or I think keepers is what they call it in Call of Cthulhu, or
Yeah.
just, you know, people trying to play the game as it is, and kind of learning all together. But my experience coming into those was it felt very limited from a player agency point of view. Not necessarily a character agency point of view, but definitely a very player agency kind of direction. And so, to kind of like sum up my experience a bit, it was kind of like a lot of people kind of follow these principles that are very talked about, the three clue rule, kind of like
Yeah.
the clue node, you know, road kind of thing, where you know you get a certain set of clues, and then you're on to the next kind of more logical kind of location. And um, when I decided to run, and I'm currently in the middle of running a Delta Green campaign, and
Is that one of
fantastic
your own,
system.
or one of the published scenarios?
I've taken the Impossible Landscapes published scenario, and I'm like, I kind of use the initial first part of it as like the almost like the base for it, but already like we've gone a million different directions that have
Sure.
nothing pertain to like what would be in the book.
Yeah.
You know, so it's yeah, and it's kind of a result of this play style. But
Sure.
uh so yeah, like the node road, I guess is what you would call it, the three clue rule. And it felt to me like as a player, I felt very confined by this system. And so when I started to kind of run, or when I made the decision to run, I wanted to build in or do my best at trying to kind of like open up the game completely in a player agency point of view. And the video specifically talks about player agency and whether the focus of the game should be on the mystery itself, should that be the main focus, or if it should be the characters within the game. And I'm very much kind of like the theater kid style, not entirely, but you know, I'm very much into like in character role play.
Sure.
So when making the decision on what to focus on, I decided that in order to not have to worry about potentially breaking the mystery situation, that I would instead make the game very character focused, in an attempt to kind of alleviate any of the, I guess like there's a lot of natural pitfalls that come with breaking a mystery narrative, right? Like with what is expected, the kind of material that you need to kind of continue to provide to keep the mystery kind of churning along, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, so it's that's kind of like what the video is mostly about, is like trying to, in my best way, and in the ways that I found so far with running this game, what has worked the best for me, which is kind of completely opening the game, making it very character focused, and instead of having like a predetermined mystery from top to bottom, where I have all of these clues lined up and I'm dishing them out at appropriate times, it's instead a lot more collaborative with the characters kind of pitching in, you know, and running it more of off like an improv setting where I'm almost yes-anding everything I'm hearing, right? Like, you know, like they come up with something interesting, I'll give them a chance to kind of talk amongst themselves, and from that, I find that the ideas are better than any idea that I personally would have had if I were to sit down and kind of come up with it, you know, one, two, three. So that was kind of the focus of the video.
Right. Okay. And there's a lot in that video that I respond to pretty strongly. The focusing on the character. Now, I think
Yeah.
possibly, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to speak with you, possibly the way we are conceiving of focusing on the character is different, but it might be the same.
Yeah, it could be, for sure.
And coming up with, possibilities for what's going on could be done the same way in my group and in your group, or it could be done very differently. So I've got some questions
for sure
about that. So let's just, as a, not really a tangent, but more context, how many players are running characters in this investigation?
Yeah, so I'm currently with the Delta Green game. I have 5 players total. But what keeps it interesting is we have one day that we're only able to play, and one of the players is only available every other. So it's always fluctuating between 4 and 5.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. That's a great number of people. There's lots of people to react to the information and react to the emotions and react to the different characters and situations and share how they're perceiving it. So it's a pretty rich environment for the type of play that you're talking about, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
For sure, I think with you saying that now, I can immediately see where it would be a lot rougher to run this type of game if I only had, say, 1 to 2 to potentially even 3 players. It would feel more confined, I guess, right? Like limited, maybe.
well, I mean, if one of the goals is to find interactions of ideas that produce responses that you couldn't have come up with or wouldn't come up with, the fewer people involved, the less likely that is to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But all right, so possible landscapes as inspiration, let's say. And,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a pretty wild launching point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, as we go through things that I think we're going to agree on all the way through is that we have shared goals in that focus on the character, whatever that might come to mean.
Yeah.
And interactions from a character standpoint are valuable, or one of the major things of the activity that we're there to experience.
Yeah, that's I would say that's for sure probably the most important part of role playing for me personally. Like that's the best part of it. Or
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And just by way of comparison for people who stumble across this video by accident, that would be compared to a group that enjoys the gambling aspect of dice-related games, and so they're looking for the thrill, they're looking for their ability to play with the odds, and they want to bring things to a point of tension where they want to release that tension by rolling the dice and seeing what the dice tell them, finding out what happens. And an in-character perspective may be less important to them than that moment of rolling the dice. And this might get lumped into the category of gameism by some people, or that sort of thing. Or they might have a focus on what the characters are doing in terms of their actions, right? Where they're going, who they're talking to, what they're accomplishing, or what they're failing to do, versus the experience of the characters doing that, right? They're doing this externally, and it's the accomplishments or failures that have value to them, rather than the perception of those from like inside the character's point of view. Would be a different way to look at all of this.
Yeah. Kind of like moving a piece on a board rather than attempting at best to become the piece and experience what they're experiencing directly.
Right. So in some games that are prone to combat, or some games that are prone to social combat, we might say, these people would be classed as some kind of tactical thinker, or something along those lines. They're there to make that particular type of decision when they play. So that's by way of comparison. Okay. So when I watched the video the first time, where it strikes me is where we diverge possibly, and that's the pursuit of, or the assumption of, story as a guiding principle versus it not being a guiding principle.
Hmm.
So where I'm coming, the way I like to speak of it is we can play to produce story as the product of our play.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we're going to play in a mystery story, and we want this mystery story to resemble mystery stories. We want to feel like we're in a mystery. It should follow certain beats. This would be an extreme version. Like it's time now for my character to suffer a setback. What should the setback be?
yeah,
That
yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of play.
yeah,
I don't think that many groups go to that extreme, but you know.
yeah.
But when we
As a
cross over in
comparison point. Yeah,
right, when we cross over the other direction, we're moving away from thinking about story at all, leaving us only with the character and their experience, right?
yeah,
So then story we're going to have regardless, right? We're going to have events in the past that we can relate. So we're going to have story, but its story is byproduct
yeah,
of
absolutely.
play. So when we get into open collaboration about events in the story, right? Events in the mystery or
Yeah,
who done it and yes anding and a lot of these techniques, they can be done from the perspective of it's a story, or it can be done
indeed.
from the perspective of it's an experience of the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And yeah, I would say that I lean more to the it's the experience of the moment side rather than specifically pursuing a set story like hmm,
Do you?
as you would. Yeah, I think so. I think so. Because I think a part of the way. Hmm, let me think. I think there's a
There's that first reaction where it this is just to give you some time to think. I'll
yeah,
I'll talk a little bit more. There's a lot of rhetoric about role playing games about what they are, right? It's your chance to be the character was
mhm,
very commonly said long ago. It's your chance to be the character, to step into the character's shoes, to travel in the world, explore a world of fantasy, that kind of thing. But that's evolved pretty quickly into you can be in the story and you can be the hero. You are a protagonist. You are the main character. You are the focus of attention. You're playing this type of character, and they're more important than all the other types of characters. There's a lot of baked in assumption
mhm.
that it's a storytelling activity. And the game master's in a position to be setting things up to create an experience of being in a story,
Indeed.
which is
Um,
not the same as the game master is
experiencing.
there giving you information that you will interpret somehow.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I would say I guess hmm, I'm trying to compare it directly to the way I'm playing this Delta
sure.
Green one. I think the goal is the experience side, but I think what maybe limit me in that aspect is the players that I'm playing with. These are very un these are not people who play tabletop games. The only reason they play is literally I am like the linchpin that is making not making them, but I'm like the person who keeps these people together to play, right?
Sure. You're the glue.
Otherwise, yeah, yeah. Otherwise, they'd probably do something else, right? But they're interested, and so I think through the style of play, what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to pull them in that direction. But I think my intuition tells me that it's not something that somebody fresh to the hobby is going to be able to immediately understand or draw themselves into directly. Like unless they already have like a specific unless they already have like a specific kind of like mind or maybe like past experiences where they can kind of draw inspiration from that into the new hobby. But the people I play with are very not to disparage them in any way because I love them all, but uh they're very like bro guys, you know? we watch sports, they watch, like it's very
Sure.
their focus is not like before me. Their opinion of like tabletop games in general probably would have been quite negative, right? So that's kind of like the thing, right? And so like
Right.
I'm the
Limited
person
exposure.
showing them,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm the one kind of showing them like, hey, it's not all these things that you think of. It's not all this, So
Yeah.
in the attempt through the game, and specifically like through the player agency side of things, I'm trying to give them as much freedom as possible so that the game eventually ends up where the primary focus is the experience of it, right? But I think as of now, the way I'm running it, and probably the way I'm talking about it as well, because a lot of that video is specifically rooted in the the experience of that Delta Green game. There is very much on the opposite side of things where to even kind of get them to start understanding what it means to be like a very in character, very experience focused player, they kind of need that throughway from one spectrum to the opposite. So it's like the game is like the potential of the game is me trying to pull them into that direction on the spectrum, but we're starting very much on the opposite side, right? So I think that might be um,
Yeah.
where some of it was a bit lost in the video, and I think
This
uh,
is what I was feeling,
also
right? Yeah.
yeah, and also I think in the video I say player agency a lot, but what I really mean to say sometimes is character agency, right? So I think there's
I
definitely a
thought so. Yeah.
miscommunication on that part as well, because I use player agency a lot, but obviously, like I mean, for anybody who isn't aware, like player agency kind of refers to like the degree of control that player would have over the game,
Over the
almost like
game. Yeah.
on a meta side, right? Whereas
Definitely.
character
Yeah.
agency is very much tightly bound to the world's internal logic and the game's
Right.
rules, right? So
Because you
abilities
kept
and all
bringing
that
up
stuff.
railroading,
Yeah,
and
railroading. Yeah,
you know, and that was kind of interesting because this is, again is one of these trigger words, or these words that are commonly used, and then we get two people in a room together and they don't agree what railroading is.
yeah. The
You know,
bane of the tabletop hobby is the definition game,
is the
where
definition. Yeah.
what I think character agency means, or what I think player agency means, or what railroading means, it's completely different to somebody else, right? Like these
Yeah.
terms in the hobby have uh, a very widely used kind of a understanding of them, right? Uh, for sure.
And so, in many cases, if I'm watching a video and I can't quite connect with how common terms are being implemented, like it just feels like they're just being they've been heard, their meaning was assumed, they're being misapplied, and there's lots of attention, like, oh, great video. I just tend to not get involved
Yeah,
with
yeah,
it.
absolutely.
Well, listening to your video, I felt like we would use these terms the same way, but we were coming to these very different conclusions, and that was like, you know,
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
going on here? What's the group like? What were the past experiences like? What were the past assumptions like? Which side of the story divide would this person self-identify as, and do their techniques match what they think their preference is,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that kind of stuff. So I was very curious about all that, but there's no way to put that in a YouTube comment without sounding awful.
Yeah, yeah, or yeah, like yeah, for sure, for sure. Like it, yeah, like almost it is kind of interesting in the hobby itself that like disagreement is such a personal thing that people can take, like even if like right now we're having a discussion, you could say like, well, I disagree with that approach to the game. In a conversation, it's perfectly fine, but like it feels weird how like online and in YouTube comments or on Twitter threads and stuff like that, um, that same
Yeah,
phrase is like a direct attack at the person, like like almost like a cutting
yeah,
phrase. Whereas like in normal life, disagreeing with somebody is not, necessarily like a an attack on the person, right? It's
yeah.
just kind of like a difference of opinion, So it's, yeah, that's
Do you want
as
coffee?
I'm,
No, thanks.
yeah, yeah, exactly. You don't like coffee, and I mean, some people actually, maybe some people do take it that way in real life too, right? You don't like coffee. You judging me for liking coffee?
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
So here we are. So coming at it from the story as byproduct side, when we invite collaboration, there's the kind that aids the the non-story environment experience, and there's the kind that interferes, and it can be difficult to tell where that line is for the individual, and then you multiply those individuals by the number of people that are in the group and the person
Yeah.
running the game, and there's a lot of discussion, overt discussion, which can take the momentum out of play, can make people feel like judged, like I hope I'm collaborating correctly, or I hope I'm describing the scene enough, or moderately, or sparsely enough to satisfy the other tastes in the group.
Yeah.
So I it can be frustrating, and the situation that you have where you're inviting people into the hobby and like inducting them into the play experience, that's kind of treasured from my perspective, because if you have a specific goal in mind, then you can curate their first
Exactly.
experiences, right, and
Yeah.
judge their natural reaction, not their randomly informed by all these different online and offline sources. So
Yeah.
that's good.
Absolutely. Yeah, one thing to do about that too is this is also so I've run them through the traditional fantasy style of games. So we've done D&D, we did AD&D, first edition,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of got them used to that style a bit, and there was definitely like already, it didn't take too long, but even playing that style of game, I tend to try to focus very much so um, the in character kind of like experience side of things, even though those games typically have like a lot of meta decision making within them,
Right.
right? There's
So
a
play
ton
is
of,
compartmentalized.
yeah, exactly, so there's a lot of that, but like in certain moments trying as best as possible, and it was working. And so then I was like, okay, what 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 is the style of game that typically goes beyond these types of games? And specifically, I think like, horror, mystery types of games are very much that, right? Like, I would say, I mean, I don't know. Let me think for a moment. Yeah, I would say that this genre of games certainly has a much more, well, I guess it's the spectrum as well, right? But it seems that people who enjoy this genre of games definitely kind of really gets into the in character as a byproduct, story as a byproduct of the experience side of things, more so than
Maybe.
D&D tends to be the case, right? It's obviously not universal, but it tends to be my experience, at least with interacting with people online and stuff. And so I said, let's jump into the deep end, right? Like if we're already kind of having this experience in a game that is full of meta decision making, specifically regarding the way you have to play it, because it's got all these rules, it's got all these mechanics, a lot of meta decision making. So if we're already kind of getting to the what I would call the meat, the enjoyable part of the hobby, then let's just go full in and see if we can do it all the way. And
Right.
so yeah, that's been the experience so far. It's like as I had said previously, like just kind of pulling them further onto that side. But we're definitely not there yet, right? I wouldn't say that this experience, if somebody were to view it from the outside, um, it would definitely not come across. It would be very, it would almost be like split down the middle at this point, is what I would say. Like there's a
Sure.
lot of as a byproduct, but then there's a lot of like the the meta decision, kind of like uh, what serves the story rather than the experience, right? And so I think that's we're kind of caught in the
Right.
middle, and I'm just dragging them. I've got like a chain wrapped around them, and I'm just like yanking as hard as I can to like get them over to the uh, ex- uh, story as a byproduct of the experience.
Okay. Um, when you're playing
Mhm.
and the players are speaking to each other, what what different registers of speech are you seeing? Like the types of out of character conversations that they're having compared to the types of, this is what the character is actually saying, and how do they communicate with each other in character as a, as an average? How do they usually talk to each other?
Um, Interestingly enough, fully in character. Anytime they speak to each other, it's always through the point of view as the character that they are playing, right? Like
All right.
specifically in character. Surprisingly,
So that wasn't something you talked about that evolved. That just happened.
that just happened. Yeah, that was their natural inclination to playing the game.
Yeah.
Uh, they put on. I mean, they do all the things that you would typically kind of expect. They like, um, every player stands for, I think, like one, tries to approach the game with kind of like a more unique speech pattern, a more, like
Sure.
really kind of like digging into like who the character is. One of them's playing like it's Delta Green, so one of them's playing like a criminal, a mafia guy who uh, it just kind of got, I don't know, somehow brought into the agency, so to speak. And he really plays into the, I'm a, I'm a,
Some gangster.
I'm a piece of shit gangster, like that he really goes into that. And he's got the accent down. And he speaks, and in a way that, they're not, I think one thing that lends itself to their ability to roleplay with each other is that they don't care about offending each other. So they'll
Mm,
really, like, if they want to say something like really harsh, they'll say it in character without worrying about if they're gonna upset the other person's kind of sensibilities, or think that it's gone too far, right? Because I think a lot of people kind of get hung up on where they're willing to role play because they don't want to offend the person personally, like it transcends the game.
sure.
They don't want that, right?
Yeah.
But because they're all very much meathead individuals, they don't really care about each other's feelings. So they fully embrace the ability to strike at each other through character. Like, what are you thinking? Are you plenty of
Right.
expletives and all that stuff. So it's
Yeah.
um, it makes for really great in character role play,
Yeah.
surprisingly.
Yeah.
Um,
Enjoyable as when you're. I think of the players in a group as a participatory audience, right? So when you're
yeah,
not in the scene, your full audience, and when you are in the scene, there's still that part of your mind that's saying, "Wow, this is great." This is
exactly. Yeah. And me witnessing it, I'm dying laughing. Like I'm doing as much as I can to not intrude on it because, if I'm
right.
laughing my head off, like it's breaking that immersion a bit. But
Laughing behind your hand.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Muting the mic, kind of like, because we play online.
Yeah.
Muting the mic, kind of like doing the best I can to keep myself outside of the range of it. But yeah, it's like you said, like when you're not in the scene, it's very much audience. Like you're witnessing this, and to witness these guys who, a couple, less than a year ago would have been, my character is doing X, Y, Z. My character is, they are now, you know direct in
Right.
that character, and seeing that
So
has been very fun.
this happened as a shift into Delta Green, or it happened playing D&D.
It was happening at the end of our D&D phase. So like initially
That's
when we
interesting.
first got into the game, it was very much meta, like, my guy
My
is gonna
character.
go
Yeah.
here, yeah, my guy is gonna go there.
Right.
Um, my guy says to you, right? Like, it's never never direct. And then as we kind of got more and more into D&D, and they were realizing, I guess, um the interesting parts and the depth of role play ability,
Right.
to the game, they started to shift into in character. And now, whenever they are interacting as their characters, it's always fully in character.
Right. Yeah. And I've got a lot of reactions to that. I mean, when you first described it, I was expecting them to have done this from the beginning, because I find that to be quite natural. Is that if people understand it's an activity of the mind, it's imagination, and that they should be imagining, where the character is, and that they are the character, then a lot of people get it. Or if you point out to them that they actually role play every day, in most conversations. You know, I
Yeah.
say, oh, I was on the highway today and some guy cut me off. It's like, oh, well, if I were there, I would have, you know, it's like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
so you
Absolutely.
understand
Yeah.
role playing 100%. So let's go. Let's go
Yeah.
try this
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. Yeah.
But some games or some cultures of play guide you away from that and into the my guy does this and the character does this, and if I spend this then I can do this, so do you think I should, and into a lot of, you know, kind of ritualized conversation on the
Yeah.
meta
Yeah.
level, right?
Yeah.
That is very efficient and useful for those games. But if we're focusing on the character, I think people very quickly come to realize that they're using many more words than they have to, and just for the sake of efficiency, it's easier to say, "I do this."
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and then as soon as they start thinking of it, thinking of the character as I, then that you know,
It starts to
unification of
blend.
perspective just
Yeah.
starts to
Absolutely.
happen.
Yeah. And I think that definitely happened. Like it was very much an approach of I think, I mean, not to like, I don't think D&D is a bad game at all, right? Like I love
Right.
D&D and stuff, but I think in a lot of ways, the extensive mechanic and the extensive kind of the robust rule set of it in some, I'm not going to say it doesn't, because I think a robust rule set actually aids character role play, but I think to a person who's completely new to the hobby, if they're not already kind of understanding of the role play aspect, if you look at it, it seems very much like a game where a lot of it would be that meta talk, right? Like, you know, decision making on like a an out of character kind of
Right.
overview of the situation sort of deal. Um, and so I think, yeah, so them coming in, them having no real concept or engagement with any kind of role play, they're not like, you know, none of them were like i- interested in like acting or anything along those lines.
Right. So
So
it's all
yeah,
new.
so yeah,
Yeah.
so it's all new. And so that shift from, you know, one side of the thing to the other has been very interesting to watch as well, because every time we play, it's always like um, a new quirk has kind of popped up that they're like experimenting with, and it's like, well,
Cool.
what the hell? Like, you're doing this
Yeah.
now, you know? And it's like, yeah, I'm doing this now. And it's like, okay, and you embrace it and then continue, right? um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I definitely agree that there's if you know coming into it, it's very natural uh to slide right into that point of view, because like you said, efficiency and everything. It just I is the more efficient way of playing through a lot of these games.
Right.
Um, and I think maybe D&D kind of has a bit of hangups in that, just because of the robust rule set that involves stuff. I think it takes like a little bit of, it takes like the learning curve, and then you can jump in, right?
Yeah.
Whereas,
I'm not sure it's
yeah,
the robustness, as you mentioned. You know, there are games where the rules and their their results
yeah,
inform the character side of your imagination pretty intensely and
yeah,
usefully. So these are
absolutely.
heavy game systems, maybe, but they're not really detracting from our ability to imagine. But it's the type of rules that and the way that they have to be processed in play, like whether it can be internalized, whether it can become a habit, or whether it's, well, I've only got this ability once a day, or you know,
Yeah, yeah,
there could be a
absolutely.
negative interaction with this thing, or there's synergies between your character type and my character type, which we might want to save for, you know,
The
there are
appropriate moment. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
there are
Yeah,
things that the players need to talk about as players,
yeah,
which can then produce a scene where you talk about what you're going to do out of character, and then you create dialogue to go along with it, so it feels like you're doing everything twice,
yeah, absolutely. Which is,
which is fine for some people,
yeah,
and it's not fine
yeah,
for others, and so I think there's a lot of enjoyable play in in that kind of in that kind of game. But if your tastes are I'm going to say more refined, and I don't mean this in a sense of better. I
Yeah,
mean it in a sense of limited, right?
yeah, yeah,
So like if you enjoy all those parts, then D&D is going to be great. But if you're sitting down to the table for only some of those parts or only one of those parts, then there's parts of the night that are going to drag.
yeah, yeah.
So you'll
Absolutely.
move
Yeah.
to a different game, But that was interesting. So I'm curious about your NPCs. Because as the experienced player in the group, you're, the inadvertent role model for the role play.
Yeah, yeah. Trying to be a good role model for role players can be at times difficult, right? Especially when you're
Sure.
handling a large
Juggling
number of
everything.
NPCs. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, specifically, I guess you're asking like how do I approach my NPCs specifically?
I'm kind of curious, like in the
Yeah.
very beginning when they're playing their first characters in their first few in situations or encounters or whatever. I wonder how much conscious thought there was into how you said what you said as the NPCs and what
Oh,
happened over time, and if their role play now uh, reminds you of you, or if it's a where did that come from, kind of
yeah.
experience.
So initially, I I think to get them into it, I played very. I mean, I always attempted myself to roleplay them quite well, but initially, the first experience of NPCs that I would have kind of given them would have been probably a bit more single service, single purpose style of NPCs. Like this is the shopkeeper, this is where you buy things. This is the
Right.
the quest giver, this is the person making you do things.
Was
But
there
over
dialogue?
time. Yeah, definitely dialogue. I would always like um one thing we always avoided, there was never dialogue with like shopkeepers and stuff because they're not interested in shopping. They don't want to do that's part of the game. They don't want to role play shopping. They just want to say, give me this, I want this, I need this, and da da da, and here's the gold for
Right.
this, and it's done. So that part, there was never
Sure.
that. But like with other NPCs, there was definitely a lot of like me pushing the role play aspect of it, right? Like, trying to give them as trying to portray them at least as more than just a portray them
Right.
more than single purpose, although they functioned as single purpose. Now though, they know that every NPC that I introduce or that they make effort to meet or kind of create through their actions, right? Like by consequence of the choices that they make. They know that if they have one of these, that this NPC is going to be as fully actualized and realized just like their characters. They're going to have their own motivations, they're going to have their own development going on in the background of whatever it is that they themselves are choosing to do. So yeah, so initially it was very much I would role play them, I think well, right? I think I'm a decent role player. I would role play them well, but their purpose was single. And then now every NPC I try to introduce has a fully kind of actualized place within I guess, the setting of the game specifically.
Sure.
And I think their role playing itself has come. I want to say it's more through their own. I don't want to say that they role play like me or anyway. I think they have all kind of found their footing in that aspect, and they are themselves coming to the realizations through the way of play, right? Um, so I think yeah, I'm trying
It's
to
hard
think
to
like
know what
in
other people are thinking, but yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But in the
But
beginning, they weren't speaking in character dialogue, or they were announcing it out of character,
yeah,
and
it was
then
very
they
much like an
they
announcing style.
yeah they came to just they make eye contact, and we know when they're speaking in character because they give us context through body language or a vocal shift or something. We understand that it's one character speaking
Absolutely.
to another character.
Yeah,
Right. It's
absolutely.
role play.
Yeah, yeah.
So they came to that. So there must have been an environment that made them feel comfortable and also recognize the possibility of it and the enjoyment of it.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I think the initial maybe hangups that they were involved in is because the style of group this is, the meathead style group, there was probably a bit of hesitancy to fully dive in initially because
sure.
not maybe not shame is too harsh of a word, but like maybe like light embarrassment because they're gonna get
Yeah,
like the other person's gonna poke and prod at them like in a often very uh, uh,
friendly way.
lighthearted way. Yeah, friendly, lighthearted way. Um,
Yeah. But you don't want to
and so I
expose yourself to being teased if you don't have to. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think them seeing me fully okay with whatever that might be gave them the sense of feeling like, okay, I can let down my guard. Whatever happens here is whatever. And now it's, now
Yeah.
sometimes there is the lighthearted kind of joking after the fact. But it'll wait till after the game, and then they'll kind of like go at each other, you know, and then but
Yeah.
it's not a problem, right? It's not limiting them from engaging more, right? Which I think is
Sure.
the best part of it.
They had no sense of what the culture of play was. They had no idea of the social context. They're operating from the existing one,
Yeah, yeah,
and
exactly.
but you change that
Yeah,
perception, and now they can conform to the new structure of the group. So that's nice.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's like a light switch, thankfully, like that doesn't
Yeah,
extend one way or the other. Like we can still be what made us friends in the first place without feeling like, and I think like in a way it's probably deepened the friendship, right? Because
yeah,
it more ability to trust the other person because that's almost a lot of what role playing is specifically, right? It's like allowing yourself to trust the other people that you're playing with in a way that you can fully engage with it as complex or as, I guess as non-complex as possible as you wanted to, right? So
yeah. Exactly. This is a similar function to when you have very different social groups, like you hang out and do a lot of activities with your close friends, and as you grow up you experiment with swearing or whatnot, but when you go home
yeah,
or
yeah.
when you go to church or school or whatever, it never occurs to you to swear. You don't accidentally swear, you just don't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's the same
I think there's a
same kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. I think there's a common a word like code switching. I think is what it's referred to. Like
Yeah,
depending on the group you're in, you have a specific way of acting that's,
yeah,
I guess, dictated by the social contract of that group specifically. Yeah,
yeah. We recognize the register on which the layer on
yeah,
which we're
yeah,
speaking. Yeah.
yeah,
So then this brings us full circle back around
yeah,
to the idea of story as product and story as byproduct. And it gets like if we're playing before we started recording, for the benefit of those who come to watch this video, we were talking about different types of fantasy and how there can be like a vanilla or assumed or generic fantasy where we don't do a lot of established world building or whatnot. We play characters in a fantasy world and everybody gets it without having to
yeah,
talk about it, compared to a very specific kind of tailored fantasy for a specific experience, like a Lord of the Rings kind of thing, or a post-apocalyptic, after a magical war kind of thing,
yeah,
scarcity and the like. So, in this sense of playing for story or not, there are decisions that we can make because we assume when we're playing a mystery that certain decisions have to be made because it's a mystery,
yeah. Absolutely. Right.
or there might have to be a certain type of timing because it's a mystery, and this kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
So this can be as overt as I want this to be 4 sessions long, and so in the fourth session, the clue will be revealed, or the villain will show up, or whatever, and it's happening for no reason other than it's session 4.
yeah, yeah. We only have this limited amount of time to work with. So at the end of this limited amount of time, we're going to reach the conclusion, regardless of where we are at that point. So it'll just,
Right.
you know, fully
So that
break the.
decision is,
Yeah,
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 that decision is made for structural or story reasons. There's nothing
yeah,
to do with the experience of the character.
yeah,
So then the whole notion of playing for 4 sessions can also be tied to this assumption of story as product, right? So we want a
indeed.
beginning, a middle, and an end,
Yeah,
right? Whereas I don't know about you, but when we were kids, we would start campaigns all the time, and there was no idea of ending ever. And we
Yeah,
would pick
yeah,
them up again, and we would stop playing, and we'd switch over to other games and back and forth, and this guy's game and that guy's game and that girl's game, and just all around, and everything was active all the time forever because it wasn't a story; it was a role playing game campaign. There was no
absolutely.
end, right?
Yeah, that is
So it's
the same with my approach. Yeah, I did experiment a bit the past couple of years. I've run a lot of like 8 to 10 session campaigns, and specifically to kind of like to play around within the like structural format of pacing and all these things and how they relate to the amount of time you have left in the campaign whatsoever. Um,
skill
but
building. Yeah,
but typically speaking, I'm very much on that same side of like when we start a game, it's gonna go it until we just stop playing, right?
right.
That's when it's gonna stop. So yeah, very much on that side of things.
Right. And then we can make decisions about what our character does. Like as players, we can make decisions about what our character does or when our character does something for reasons that are separate from why the character would do them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And I don't mean this in the I only have so many wound levels left kind of way, because the character's definitely feeling that pain probably more than the player is.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
I'm
Every
not going to
time,
do
right? Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
tired of getting beat up.
yeah, yeah,
but it seems too early to do this. Like, oh, I'm not going to spend those luck points now, or I'm not going to trash my bond now because it seems too early.
yeah,
Too
yeah.
early for what,
Absolutely.
you might ask? Well, too early
Yeah,
in the story,
yeah,
So these decisions are
absolutely.
coming from somewhere else, and it's just like it's baked into the current conversation, like the informed conversation of people who you know tear apart games to see how they work, and the uninformed conversation of people who are just starting. Right? It's
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
the words that we're borrowing, the words that we fumble for to try and explain what we mean, they all seem to be literature words and Lit 101 words and filmmaking words and cinematography words,
Yeah, yeah,
and they put us in a box of
yeah. Understanding the story beats or the arc narrative or everything like that. Yeah. Especially when you said like using like cinematography or like film directing type words. Um, I have a deep dislike of that because I feel like it immediately puts my mind in a place that I'm not in my character. I'm sitting at a screen watching my character,
yeah,
which I don't ever want to feel. And with these players specifically, you know, I think surprisingly they get it. They're just still kind of wrangling with the side of things. Uh, hmm. I
you're
think they're still
wondering what they
wrangling.
should do.
Yeah, because like okay, for instance, like within the first session, I mean, they were destroying bonds right away. They did not care about this meta. I mean, I wouldn't call bonds necessarily like a meta currency, but it kind of functions somewhat like it. Like you're not
Right,
necessarily losing it as a you're not necessarily losing
a character
um
that you're bonded to. Yeah,
yeah, you're kind of losing you're just making kind of a more, I guess it is kind of like a meta decision on whether I'm going to take this to my sanity or if I'm going to ruin a relationship. And it still has it still has effects, right? It still has consequences. It just depends on if it's directly to your character's like way of being or if it's
right,
to their home life, I guess you could call it on the outside. So yeah,
right,
like for they don't care about using these things in a meta way, like let me maximize this for the appropriate story beat session. Like the first session, there was a lot of because they were just doing a lot of stuff. There was a lot
experimenting.
of yeah, and a lot of sanity loss through that
Well, yeah,
experimentation.
that game
Yeah,
open that campaign opens hard. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And they're burning it, you know. Some I mean some of them took the sanity loss, but also a lot of them just started to burn this, you know, burn the bond, like, you know.
right.
And they're and I force the role play aspect of that, right? Like I don't allow the burning of a bond to just be a
Yeah.
scratch on the page. Like we're
Right.
gonna play that moment out. And when we did, it became very like, oh shit, like you know, like I get what's happening now because if I lose this bond, well, guess what? My sanity suffers just as much if I had just lost the sanity in the first place. So it's like, um, I guess the understanding of the game and how it functions itself, but
Yeah.
also understanding their place as characters in the game, right? And realizing kind of there's like a reckoning within the first few sessions that I think now that we're past, will kind of open up fully into the byproduct side, but it's too early to tell. And
Sure.
and there's no cap on this session. Like there's no this will go until
Yeah.
they figure it out or until they
And
all
then
die.
there's more investigation to follow if they survive, and or
Yeah,
whoever
yeah,
replaces them. It's
yeah,
open, right? So
absolutely.
that's cool. But yeah, that the allowing for learning curve is important. I mean, we can cling on to our particular bias, like it's going to be an epic story, or it's going to be, a heart-rending experience. We can cling on to that so tightly that we don't give people enough time to learn the game. They don't get a chance to learn how the group fits well together, to find out how that group should probably play this game to
Yeah,
enjoy it
absolutely.
to its best.
Yeah.
So
And
like I
and
yeah, go on.
and clinging through also, I find that like when people kind of cling to the expectation of what the game should be, through that clinging, they completely disallow it to be that, right? Like if you're too strongly focused on making, let's say, like heart-wrenching or emotionally driven situations,
Yeah, then it's all
um,
here. Yeah,
yeah, people are gonna like. I think other people are gonna read into that, and they're gonna kind of like get pushed off on it. They want that stuff to. I feel like people want that stuff to come about naturally through the way of play, not
yeah,
by somebody going, "This is going to be a heartbreaking moment, and I'm going to make sure it is." And it's like,
right,
well, now you're kind of imposing your will on me, but this is
right.
a game where I'm this character, and I don't want anything imposed upon me if I can control it, right? Um, so I think with that a lot, I think a lot of people kind of cling to the expectation of what things should be or could be, I guess, the potential of it.
Yeah,
But through that act, ruin the possibility of it being such a thing.
I think so.
Yeah.
You can see
Yeah.
this a lot in like preparation advice videos and things
Oh
where
yeah.
there's talk about having an appropriate soundtrack and appropriate sound effects and all the stuff for the way that you imagine a situation will go, right?
Yeah.
Or a climax you're hoping will happen, and this sort of stuff. And so when you're prepared for all of this stuff and you're hammering home with your description of your now ex-girlfriend, closing the
Yeah.
door
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
final time on your Delta Green
Yeah.
agent's face, and the
Yeah.
sad violin music is swelling. It can feel really artificial.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And the
like,
person will
wow,
go,
you did a
well,
lot of preparation for this, is the
yeah.
response, rather than, oh crap, what did I just do?
Yeah. To speak to that, I don't, I'm not against that stuff. Particularly because of that reason, because I don't know exactly how this is going to read, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm forcing these feelings or this interpretation of a scene to the characters
Right.
directly. I don't ever want them to think that this is my intention for them to experience. But I do use sound effects to really great
Sure.
effect, I think. There's this one sound effect that's all over the internet, where if you're wearing headphones, it sounds like there's like a knock at the door, and it sounds like somebody is like beating down your door, literally. Like it feels very, very real. And midway through the game, I was just like, and you hear a knock at the door, and I just played that soundboard really fast, and they were all like, "What the?" That it caused this very visceral reaction, and I think it like immediately kind of like, "Oh shit!" Like we're like now this is kind of really into the thing. Whereas I think with music, I think it can definitely enhance it at times, but I think you have to be very careful with how you use these aspects of the
Like
game
anything.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. But I mean, even that advice, like be careful with how you use something. I think it's kind of lost a lot in modern tabletop gaming because I think there's a lot of advice out there that tells you that you to ensure X, you have to do Y, right?
Here's the
And
top 5 ways to do. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Top 5 ways to get your characters invested in a game, and it's
yeah.
like how about let them play and like, like like I don't need to force this stuff on people. But yeah,
So, but
yeah,
to support your point, I think there's a huge difference between having gunshots, broken glass, door bells, door knocks, these things that humans might encounter in the world as a
oh
as a
yeah,
list of sound effects, compared to a recorded speech
yeah, yeah,
in the ex-girlfriend's voice and all the things that she's
yeah,
she's
yeah,
saying.
yeah.
There's a big difference.
Yeah. You look down and read the note that she left you, and then I start playing a track where it's just a friend of mine is reading out all
Exactly.
the dialogue. It's like, what the, like for some people, that might be like incredibly immersive, but I think for a lot, I
Sure.
mean, for me, I would be like, is this a cutscene? Like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, is this kind of, it's not serving the function of it's serving the function of
Right.
the story, but it's not serving the function of my experience. Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
if your bias or the preferences that grow out of your biases lead you to want that not a story experience, the story is byproduct experience, as soon as this overt preparation that smacks of they had to know I was going to be in this situation in order to prepare
Yeah.
all of that. So it feels like, is this a railroad that I'm like, none of the thoughts that you're having in response are your character's thoughts. And so
Exactly. Yeah.
you've been denied the thing that you sat down at the table for.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, and that's kind of like a big part of the approach as well. Like, I mean, I make it clear to the players at least that like, um, like they know that the way that we're playing, they know meta-wise at least that they know that I'm not coming up with things prior to the game. I mean, there might be like a small, like the first 30 minutes of the game or the first, 20, 15 to 30 minutes of the game will just be kind of like a semi-prepared thing that I've gotten taken care of because I know the immediate response to the final actions of the previous session, right?
Right.
So it's only like, they're only ever in prep mode, I guess, from me for like 15 minutes, maybe at the start, 15 to 30 minutes. But then after that, they know that there's not anything limiting them as players from pursuing whatever goals or leads or whatever that they want to do in the
Right.
game. There might be limitations on character agency, but there's not limitations on player agency, which I think is a kind of like a distinct thing that a lot of people, right, don't necessarily
Right.
know or
But
understand.
there there will still be limitations on player agency because you're there as a game master.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think,
But yeah.
yeah, the
So like
limitations on,
it's the degree of limitation, right? So
yeah, yeah, about as
they're
free as you can get without, you know, without while still having a game master, I guess, right? It's kind of
right.
the the peak that I'm drawing for is like
Sure.
I'm trying to give them I'm trying to ramp up the player agency side of things as much as possible, and try to remove myself as much as I can other than these particular moments that, without me it's just a LARP and we're not really kind of like
Or it's
I
just
guess it's kind
improv.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's just like full improv and you know, so I guess in a sense they do kind of still rely on me to kind of be like the throughway to connect what they're doing back to the central idea of the mystery that we're playing or whatever, right? Um,
Right.
yeah,
So that's
but
I guess that's the last point, the point that I guess we should close on looking at the time, is
oh yeah,
the notion of when we carry this through to we carry it through to its fullest extent, like in a nearly or completely game masterless environment. The one thing that we give up is the objective reality of the imagined world,
yeah,
and we embrace a fully subjective world that things only become true after we put them into play.
yeah,
So in the case of the mystery, one of the ideas I felt that you were trying to get a handle on was the idea of how can it still be a mystery if if we're allowing this. And so I think where you went with the video is that, well, we're going to focus on the characters. The mystery is going to be the backdrop. It will still get solved or not solved depending on play. But the
Yeah,
focal point of play is what happens to the characters during this period of their lives. That's
exactly.
the important thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's and I came to that conclusion specifically because I think I said it a bit earlier, but trying to avoid the I feel like typically most mysteries have, or at least my experience with mysteries so far has been very structured, right? There's a
sure.
structural kind of way to play a mystery out. And I wanted to avoid that because I felt as a player that that impeded upon my player agency specifically, not my character agencies, but my player agency. And so, yeah, like trying to grasp for, like you said, like kind of like trying to stay away from this feeling that everything is kind of structured for the intention of solving the mystery. Instead, let's focus on the characters. And then if the mystery gets solved or if it doesn't get solved or whatever else happens, that'll just be interesting things happening. But
In the
the focal
characters'
point,
lives. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't have to worry about breaking the structure. There's just no structure to begin with. It's kind of like the focus that I had and kind of the way I'm running the game. Like instead of a mystery structure to be solved, we're
Right.
just kind of going through it through the characters lens. Right.
Right. So you could view what you're doing as a reaction, like intentional or not, but you can view it as a reactionary position to a game set up like Gumshoe is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Where
Yeah.
where you're going to move through and and be able to solve the mystery at a kind of, I don't want to say predictable pace, but anyway, you can feel the shape of the traditional story there and know how to navigate within it using your character.
Yeah.
My reaction, my solution was a little different.
Mhm.
So I've been sharing online for about a year now a Call of Cthulhu actual play
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
I'm putting some of the stuff into, not into practice because it's what I always do, but putting it out there. Most of my videos are usually about us learning a game and sharing the learning process of trying a new game. But this one,
Yeah.
I just wanted to show, how we actually play. So we invited a
Played
bunch
it
of
out.
people we don't normally play with. We didn't have a formal session zero with a formal social contract. This is what you must do. We didn't do that. We invited people to
Yeah.
come and we learned how they played. A goal was stated for, we want people to be able to experience and communicate with each other in character. That was all that was said.
Yeah.
And so watching this campaign, you can see all the different ways that all these different people express that one idea. And it's been hopefully interesting for people to see.
Mhm.
But in it, there's definitely an objective world, and there are things happening done by the non-player characters that would be mysterious, would be mysteries for these investigators to handle if
Yeah.
they care to,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? So they
Yeah.
come
Just
across, yeah,
yeah, like
go
just
on.
basis on like just based on the fact that they don't even know, right? That alone kind of already kind of determines that this thing is a mystery because we just don't know what the hell is happening. So like, it's always kind of focused on that.
Yeah,
I would say that like in my attempt to like not have a determined structure for um the mystery itself, I do want to be clear that it's not that sorry, it's not that it's not that the world is not objective still. Like there is still
okay,
things happening. There's still things that for sure happened that whether the players find out or not is kind of like in their hands to figure, to come to that conclusion or
interact with,
figure
or
it out. Yeah, interact
yeah,
with. Yeah, so um the I think the big part of it was balancing the lack of structure with the kind of like expected, maybe not expected, but within the space of like a mystery style game. Because typical like mystery structures, like, this happened and this is why, this happened, this is why, and these are the things that lead you to know why it happened, right? Like these are the X, Y, Z clues kind of that kind of solve the mystery,
Right.
or lead you to the point where you can solve the mystery, right? Like put you in a position for it.
That's certainly how people
Um,
explain it to people. Yeah.
yeah. It's typically like how it appears to be to. I guess that's how it feels is probably a better way to say it, right? That's how it
Maybe.
feels intuitively for most people. Um, but um, but it's not to say that there's not objective things that exist regardless of player interaction or
Sure.
not, right?
Because there is
To
still a game master
yeah, and there's
in your setup.
still
But
a setting situation, like yeah.
but in your video, one of the things you said was not to be too attached to who done it because there might be a better who down the
Oh
line
yeah,
kind of thing.
absolutely, yeah,
So
yeah,
there's a certain fluidity to the objectivity. It's not fully subjective. It's not all improv,
yeah.
and it's
But
not
it's not,
all shared
yeah,
improv. And it's not you're not flying by the seat of your pants per se. You've got an initial idea, but you're willing to change it.
exactly, yeah. Like I mean, I don't want to. I guess on the basis of not ruining the
Spoilers.
the Delta Green. Yeah, I don't want to spoil the landscapes, impossible landscapes, because it's uh as a source, it is. I think like Delta Green is some of the like best of
Best.
these types of
Yeah.
books. They're so good. But yeah, I guess I do kind of like maybe waffle or kind of hover between objective and subjective because I will have like if the players do nothing as far as coming up with better interpretations or more interesting interpretations, then there is something that like there is a conclusion to the mystery should they follow it without adding anything additional to it.
Right.
So that does exist, but I do leave the room for if they start to because already like specifically with the Delta Green one, like we're not going to reach the natural conclusion of that I guess you call it like an adventure, or I'm not sure what they call them
It's
specifically.
a campaign. Yeah. That
Campaign,
one.
yeah, campaign. So we're definitely not going to reach the expected impossible landscapes
Because you've
ending.
already started to branch into other.
Yeah, because we're already dealing with things that have like that are not in the book whatsoever because it's been created on them. So like
Yeah.
the
That
idea of what's
original
happening.
outcome is no longer relevant, kind of.
Yeah, no longer possible, I would say. Like maybe it's possible should they just like completely 180. Should they read the book and then like decide we're gonna we're gonna go ahead
Let's
and
follow
cancel all
that
this stuff.
clue.
Yeah, instead yeah. Should they read the book and cancel everything that they've been searching for? But like, like
Right.
we're already on a tangent that is so far removed from the basis of that campaign, uh, just through that style of play. And I think while the campaign is amazing, right? I'm not gonna like disparage Impossible Landscapes. Like if you play it as is, it is an incredible like work of art and probably incredible experience. I haven't had it myself, but I assume that it is incredible to experience because of how well it is crafted
Right.
in the campaign. But I think for the players, this already feels more interesting and engaging to them because to them, they feel like they are actually the sleuths that are figuring this thing out, right?
Right.
Like they feel like it's I guess it's like a soft form of dishonesty because they
Sure.
feel like they are geniuses right now. Like to them, everything is happening like from their mind, they could assume that this is all in the book and they're just geniuses at figuring this stuff out. That's their experience as a player.
Right.
Um,
Unless they
but the
hear this.
reality is that, yeah, unless they hear this exactly, which, you know, uh, oops, but, but I think that experience feels better. Like, even if you're aware that it's kind of, um, actually, I don't know if I should say it as definitive as that, but, I think even if you're aware that this is the style of play that I'm kind of incorporating with this, um, well, they watched the video that I released, so they know that this is the style of game that we're in, and it's still very engaging to them because they
Well, they don't
realize
know
that
when you're doing it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. They don't know when it's happening, what is a part of the source material, and what is just their natural fabrication or whatever, or what have you. Um, and that I think it creates, hmm, I think it creates a very engaging and immersive experience when it feels like in a mystery game, you are as smart as what you would expect a mystery
Right.
detective to be, right?
The
Yeah.
activity of the character and the activity of the player are the same. So you have
Yeah.
this unity of perspective, and a phrase that the YouTuber Primeval Fantasy has popularized. It's an efficient way to express it, I think.
Yeah.
Anytime that what the player is thinking, and what the
Yeah.
character must be thinking, anytime that happens, right there, there's this great opportunity for the experience that's possible through play. And
Yeah.
in a mystery,
Absolutely.
that can be really hard, especially if the game assumes something like a Sherlock Holmes is the typical player character. Well, like
Oh yeah.
the
Yeah.
assumption in Gumshoe is that you're the best of the best of the best, and I think it's hard for many people to live up to that level of character. And so, how do we get there? Well, we end up having to talk about it out of character in order to come up with you know
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff. But so that's definitely one way to achieve that
That
experience. But
feeling.
like you
Yeah.
say, it involves dishonesty, like
Yeah.
of a type.
Yeah, of a type for sure. Yeah. And it is uh one thing I want to like clarify is that with the release of that video and stuff, I'm not saying like you have to run this way in order to get this experience. It's more like
Right,
it's more like a personal like, hey, this is what I've been doing, and this is the way it feels. Like this is how it's going for me. Um,
right.
Obviously,
That is
like
a
depending on the
nuance
group.
that's easily lost in the modern in the modern
Yeah,
era.
yeah, dude. I tell you, man. Like I've like one thing I did not expect. I expected people to disagree and stuff like that. I expected all that stuff when I was releasing videos. But I what I didn't expect is like this. It almost feels like this weaponized, purposeful, bad faith interpretation of what you're saying. Like I can be very clear. Like in the video, I think I'm pretty clear. Like, this is what I'm doing, and this is how it's working for me, and this is why I think these things are so good. This is why I think psychological and mystery kind of really blend well with each other, right? This is
Yeah,
just an opinion, right? I'm not saying if you're gonna run a mystery, you need to make a
you have to
psychological
do
horror
it. It's
game.
got to be
You
this way.
have to, yeah, you have to run very open like this. You can't use, the three clue rule. You can't use these
Yeah,
things. Like I think you can use those things all to great effect, but I think it depends on your style as a keeper, a handler, like whatever it might be for the game.
yeah.
Um, and you kind of have to, yeah, it's
It's not
yeah,
relativism to say that this is a
yeah, yeah,
technique, and this technique has this effect.
yeah. In my experience, because it could be the case that you do this technique and it has the exact opposite experience in your case, right? Like that could
Who did
be
you play
an
with?
outcome of it. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So
I call that
it's
the alchemy of play, right? It's
exactly. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. Yeah. How things blend determined
yeah,
the end
the
product,
outcome.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these were the things that I wanted to get at, and the flaw I felt in the video was I was hearing an attitude very similar to my own, and I'm way far into the story as byproduct side,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the techniques being deployed are pretty far into the story as product side.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like, well, is this going to produce the long-term satisfaction, that the video maker wants? I
Yeah.
and if I come at this as a new player who hasn't realized what my bias is, but my satisfaction is coming from those in-character experience-based moments, and I try and follow these steps, most of the time this is going to be an out-of-character process, right? I'm thinking about these
Yeah.
things,
Well,
or we're openly collaborating. I don't mean
yeah,
that's what you meant. I mean that's how it
that's how it
could
was
likely
perceived.
be taken. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, yeah, to be clear, like, the stuff that the players come up with is all in character. I'm not like
Right.
taking their meta suggestions and then kind of incorporating it. They are pursuing things in character, fully in character,
Yeah,
and then
that's awesome.
I'm realizing what they're doing, and I'm saying, oh, okay, that's like, and I take from here and I take from there, and I kind of
Right.
I package it together in a way that is satisfying to the in character experience. But
Right.
but yeah,
And sometimes the player's logic is simply better. Like the players as a group, their logical faculties are better than the one person who put the mystery together. And they go, well, this happened at this time and this happened at this time. So the one person it can't be is this person. And you go, oh crap, that's the person who did it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. How the fuck, how do I explain that? Oh shit, like I gotta, jump around hoops. And then you end up with like a really unsatisfying experience where they go like, but it couldn't have been him. How the hell is it him? And then you start to, maybe even like a meta way, you start to kind of explain it. And then they're just like, none of that makes sense. This is
Yeah.
stupid. I'm
So there's
disengaged. Right. Yeah.
So it's really easy to, to climb up on your high horse and say, those techniques suck or those techniques are great, but there's
Yeah.
always the group, there's the game, there's the way the group understands the game, and there's so many factors that go into to making the things work.
Absolutely.
So so I'm really glad that we had the chance for this conversation.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah, because I think a lot of people would have, misinterpreted your first comment. Like, there's a flaw in the video, and it would have been like, who the fuck does this
I,
guy think he is, right?
exactly. And as soon as I hit send, I was like,
yeah, but no, I agree. I think there's after the conversation, I think we probably agree on a lot of things, right? After
a
the
lot of things.
conversation,
Yeah.
but prior, it would have been like the experience is um so limited. And I think like the fact that we've been sitting here talking for about an hour and a half shows that like, and we haven't even touched on so many aspects of like mystery games and horror
Right.
games specifically that like there's so much more that could be said that can't be said in a, let me look at it's a 10-minute video, right? How can I
Right.
sum up all of this conversation in a 10-minute video? Very difficult. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
but yeah, it's nothing is finite. And I'm definitely glad we had this conversation because I enjoy conversations like these. I don't necessarily want to talk to somebody who I blatantly agree with on every single thing because then it just sounds like we're just patting each other on the back
Echo.
for like, the whole time.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your perspective on this and where you felt the things differed from the intention and then the outcome specifically itself, right?
Yeah.
Of this way of play. Yeah.
I've certainly been in the position to go back and watch a video that I thought was really really clear, and then when I get to watch it kind of as a having forgotten exactly what I said, when I get to watch it as a fresh audience member, going, that was not as clear as
Yeah. Yeah.
as I
I'm
could
having
have been.
this. Yeah. Yeah. I released a video specifically talking about like why I have issues with fantasy races when I'm playing extremely immersive character campaigns. And I thought I was extremely clear on the fact that like this is my experience and this is specific in this very specific context. But every comment that goes against it is you hate fantasy races, and I'm like, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. But
Yeah.
looking back, I listened to the video now and I fully recognize where these people are coming from because it does sound, unless you pick up like this specific phrasing and you understand it the way I meant it to be understood, your interpretation of this video is on another
Yeah.
level of understanding. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it was definitely a fun conversation.
Good.
Enjoyed it a lot. I've heard or I specifically I just watched Black Lodge Games, their recent video talking about a potential Wraith game with you, which I
Yeah.
think is incredible because I think Wraith is a game that is very challenging from a immersive character experience. I think it takes like a level of skill. So I know I don't know if it's planned to be like an actual player, like a look into it, or just like a private kind of side thing. But Wraith is I'm very interested in Wraith, and they seem to note you as uh, a great talking head or a great well of knowledge when it comes to this game. So
yeah, I hope I can live up to the reputation.
yeah, absolutely.
Yes, but Wraith is a favorite, and I don't know at this point whether or not it will be shared, or how long it will be, and that sort of thing. When they're finished with their Kickstarter obligations, it's time to start talking about it more seriously.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cool.
So hopefully it will be shared, or at least something that we can talk about in some productive way to make Wraith more open to people, because it's easy to be intimidated by Wraith.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's one of those things where I got introduced to it way before my time, or, as a player, I think. But just reading it, you could kind of like, specifically second edition, but like the first initial release of second edition, not like, I know they've done something weird with like how they've updated it through the years and stuff like that. But there's like if my understanding of it is correct, is that there's a definitive second edition of Wraith, and then they don't necessarily update it to another edition. They just kind of release material for it, I think is what the plan on that.
There was a first edition which was pretty good, and there was a second, as first edition White Wolf games go, and then there was a second edition, and then there was various expansions to it, like the Great War and things like that, and then there was the 20th anniversary, which came out much later than the 20th anniversary, but but and it took lessons learned from the other 20th anniversary editions to make some changes. But the core of the game is troop style play, so it becomes a challenge right from the get-go. If you're going to have your unity of perspective, it can only be when you're playing the psyche of your character and not the shadow of the other person's character, and that's there's some challenges there.
Yeah, it's the kind of game where like I got a copy of it too early for me as a player, but reading it, it was like, holy shit! Like you can see the potential of play with this thing, and you're like, whoa! Like it blew my mind.
Who can I play this with?
yeah, and then it's like, and then you have to like think like who can you play with this? Like like who can really live up to the expectations of this game? But yeah, I think I think this is very interesting. So I wanted to note that because it's there's not enough Wraith content out there. I think it's very much a unfortunately kind of, I guess, like overshadowed game compared to like Vampire and all that other stuff that they do.
Which I guess is ironic considering the subject matter.
Yeah.
The game is screaming about its untold potential and unreached desires on the other side of this invisible barrier, and nobody knows it's there. So
yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for speaking with me.
Absolutely.
And hopefully
glad to have the time.
Do this again.
For sure. I mean, it seems like our schedules are a lot more aligned than if I were North American. So, anytime, any place, I'm down. And in the future, I'll have a webcam, so I'm not you're not staring at a blank screen that just says Trill with an eclipse. So, All right.
Awesome.
But I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me, and I look forward to any future conversations we may have.
Me too. All right. Take care.
Right. You too.
You have been listening to the Casting Shadows podcast, a podcast you can find wherever it is that podcasts go to die. Or you can find it on YouTube, where maybe something will reanimate it. For details on how to contact us, please check the show notes. Until next time, take care.